men and women that I woke up alongside in Walter Reed Army Medical Center. When I was injured in 2010, there was about 50, 60 men and women every single month that were waking up in a very similar condition to my own in Walter Reed Army Medical Center. I'm missing 2 legs and a finger. I have friends that are missing 3 limbs, friends that are missing 4 limbs, friends that are blind, friends that are burned, friends that are a combination of all the above, friends that have traumatic head injuries. And what I didn't witness out of any of those friends were individuals that were giving up, individuals that were quitting, individuals that were saying that was the end of it and there was nothing going forward in life. What I did witness was a group of people that were faced with the biggest challenges that they'd ever seen in their life, that most people could ever imagine, and they weren't quitting and they weren't giving up. They were taking those challenges, they were owning them, they were looking them in the eye, and they were giving them a size 10 in the backside, and they were becoming that much stronger because of their challenges. And that's who we are as a people. That is who we are as Americans, that when we're given these challenges, we do own them. And we become stronger. I got a buddy that wrote a book, and one of the things that I always remember from his book was he went out there and he said this phrase that always stuck with me. He said, how do you temper steel? How do you make steel strong? And the way that you do it is you have to put it in the fire. When you put steel in the fire, when you put metal in the fire, and then it comes out, it comes out that much stronger. And we as people, we are the same way, but we can't lose that about ourselves. If we lose that piece of ourselves, then we lose the greatest thing about who we are as Americans, that we always overcome these challenges, and that we always have overcome these challenges. And I spoke a little bit before saying, this is the story that this is the words that my father gave me. When my father came to my bedside, I said, my dad and I, we love each other. He's still around today. He's 87 years old. He taught me that he's never too old to influence me, and I'm never too old to be influenced by him. And my dad and I, we love each other, but we never went around saying that we love each other. It just wasn't who he and I were as men, that we would go around. It just wasn't our relationship. And but I always knew that he did. And he came to my bedside, and he was very tearful. He was very emotional. And said, Brian, I love you. I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad you're alive. And, I'm proud of you. He said all these different things to me. And then right after that, it went back to tough love. And he gave me the most important lesson he could have ever given me in his life. He said, Brian, you can't let this keep you down. You got to find a way to get out there and pull yourself up and get back to work. You can't let your kids see you sitting on your butt, regardless of what happens to you in life, because your kids will think it's an okay way for them to go through their life. Most important thing that he ever told me, probably the most important thing that he'll ever tell me till the day that he goes in his grave, because that's something that I carry with me every single day as well. And it's what actually led me in part to running for office initially. My father gave me that lesson right after I woke up, and he's seeing me for the first time. I was out for about a week. And after he gave me that lesson, and I'm sitting there, I'm reflecting on life as I'm an inpatient for the better part of 2 months, where I had nothing to do but sit on my butt in a hospital bed with my thoughts. And my wife and I, we had been married for about 3 years at that point, and our oldest son was 6 months old at that point. And I spent a lot of time thinking, and I'm looking at my wife sit across the hospital room from me one of those days. And this was a very emotional time for me as well, sorting through what is going to be my future, because I really felt, as I discussed with some of you, like I'd lost my purpose in life. My purpose in life was defending this country. It was fighting for this place, and it didn't matter to me whether I was cleaning a toilet at Fort Bragg or whether I was disarming bombs in Afghanistan. I was serving my country, and I thought I'd lost that purpose. And after my father told me that, in some reflection, I'm laying in that hospital bed, and I'm looking across the room at my wife Brianna, and she's holding our 6-month-old son Magnum. And I told her, I said, Bree, I said, I'm just not going to let the best example that I ever set for our kids be something that's in my past. I'm not going to let the best example that I give them be something that's behind me. And I'm going to find a way to make sure that the most important contribution that I give is something that's still in front of me. And that's where I started to think that maybe I would find another battlefield, and that my battlefield would be Washington, D.C.
Amen.
And that's where I started thinking about it. And laying in that hospital bed just a couple weeks after injury, I decided, started thinking about running for office. And when you're a military guy, you're slightly tactical and slightly strategic. And I started thinking about what my plan was going to be to do that, to execute that, to get to the finish line and ultimately regain that purpose of defending my country again. And I did that, and I ended up being successful. And
thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God.
I'm very proud to be able to do it again.
Love you, Brian.
And I'll just tell you this last thing, unless there's any more questions, but I'll tell you this last thing. This was very profound to me. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was something that brought it full circle for me. And what brought it full circle was this. My oath when I entered the military was the same as everybody else's, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, so help me God. And when I was being sworn in as a member of Congress, I got to take the exact same oath again.
Yep.
And for me, that was very special, because what brought me to doing that was trying to regain that purpose that I had lost when I could no longer go out and be an asset on our battlefields overseas. And now I got to take that same oath again. That's what brought it full circle for me in regaining my purpose in life. So the message, and that kind of goes back to what I just said in the beginning part of these remarks, whenever I get to speak to young people, it's always about finding their purpose in life, and just find something bigger than yourself as an individual to go out there and serve. And if you do, you will never have any regrets in life, in my opinion.
Wow, that's fabulous.
Hey, Brian.
I am so happy we opened up for questions. Thank you, Brian. God bless. I'm going to leave. Ronald Reagan always had these stories to tell. I didn't understand until now. I'm 70 years old, and now I understand why he always told stories. Well, Dana, you always have to tell a little story to get your point across. And so what is this all about? What are we all about? Okay. And again, it goes back to God, in the sense that God has a special role for the United States of America. This is a special role for us, because we represent every race and every religion and every ethnic group on this planet. And years ago, that was never brought home to me, that Americans have this role to play, and people look to us, and we will determine what the future of this planet is. And the human race, if it's going to be a human race that respects each other's beliefs and rights, it'll be because of us, U.S., United States. Years ago, I always talk about stories I learned in the Reagan administration, and please excuse me for pontificating about this time in my life.
No, please.
Okay.
No, it's okay.
Okay. Well, there was Elaine Chao. You know Elaine Chao? She's a good friend of ours, and she's now the Secretary of Transportation in the new Trump administration. Elaine Chao worked with us at the Reagan White House. And so I'm going to come back to that. That's important. Well, my father and mother both came from very poor farms in North Dakota. These were homesteaders, and the homesteaders got land that we Republicans gave them land to own. That was really important, that we provided ordinary people with ownership, but the land wasn't all that good, but they owned it. And they established their farms and struggled. And when America was in trouble, after Pearl Harbor, my father joined the Marine Corps.
Semper Fi.
Yeah, Semper Fi, that was it. Okay, so he joined the Marine Corps, and he went off to fight World War II. He became a DC-3 pilot all over the Pacific. And in the last parts of the war, he actually flew missions up and down the Philippines, taking ammunition to the people in the front and picking up their wounded and bringing them back. And in the last 2 months of the war, he was ordered to take.
C-47 it was.
It was what now?
A C-47.
Well, the DC-3s or C-47s, whatever they called them, they were the same plane, I think. And he ended up taking, he was ordered to take his squadron of 5 planes to Shanghai. And the Japanese troops who had occupied Shanghai were in revolt, and everything was breaking down, and it was a monstrous situation in Shanghai. And this is an important part, right? Here's China, a big hunk of territory. My father was the point person, the Marine that was ordered to go to Shanghai first and establish an American presence in this traumatic and horrible situation. So he lands with his 5 planes, and they didn't have any, air traffic control or whatever. They made their way down into Shanghai. They found the airport, and they got out. And my dad goes, he said, the first thing we did is we asked a little Chinese guy, where is the home of the Japanese commanding officer? And they pointed to a big house near the airport, and we marched over and we knocked on the door and said, I am Captain of the United States Marine Corps, D.T. Rohrbacher. You will leave this house. It is now the possession of the United States government, and you will not return. And out goes this Japanese guy, and in goes my dad's squadron, who used that house for about 2 years. During that 2 years, and it was horrible situation. China was turmoil, and he survived. He got people helping him and such, and he flew people all over China to make these political deals that needed to be made at the end of World War II. So anyway, back to the Reagan White House. Elaine Chao was there, and her parents are there on the day that Reagan's being inaugurated for the second time. And we go to, and I bring my parents to the executive dining room, and we sit at the same table, very similar to these tables that you're at right now. And there were her parents, and there were my parents, and Elaine Chao's parents, however, Elaine Chao her father was a incredibly well-educated Chinese person, probably educated in English schools, very high elite English schools, and he was worth about $100 million then in shipping. He owned a big shipping line, so a really high class guy. And my dad was the Marine officer who stayed in the Marine Corps after the war, and stayed for 23 years and retired as lieutenant colonel. And so there he is with me, my mom and dad, at the table with these very elite, wonderful people who were part of Reagan's revolution, these Chinese people who Elaine Chao now, even today, is helping us with what we need to do to make America better. So there we are at the table, and my father sits down and says, oh, hi, where do you come from? And they said, oh, we come from Shanghai. And my dad said, oh, Shanghai. I'm the first American guy who landed in Shanghai. That was my job, to come and, as part of the initial tip of the spear, to bring American presence into Shanghai at the end of the war, when the Japanese had mutinied and there was such chaos. They said, oh, it was horrible, and they're going through how horrible it is. Okay, so as the breakfast goes on, my father says, by the way, I just got this electric watch. And he leans over to this man who's been educated at the very best English schools. He speaks better English than my father does. And he leans over and he says, hey, look at this watch. It's an electric watch. See this? Watchy? Look at this watchy. Which, of course, is what was left over from dealing with people with less income during that time period. And I was very embarrassed. I go, oh, okay. So anyway, as we walked out of that little encounter at the breakfast table in the White House, Elaine Child's parents are there, but my dad and my mom start walking out.